second plenary session focusing on integrity. So our keynote speaker will be Dr. Li-Qiu Meng, and we also have three panelists, Nadine Alame, who will be joining us virtually, and two other panelists are Dr. David Paget and Dr. Bo Zhou. Both are here on site. So let's start it with our keynote speaker, Dr. Li-Qiu Meng. I will take the pleasure to, to quickly give you a very brief introduction of her. Dr. Li-Qiu Meng is a professor of cartography at the Technical University of Munich, Germany. She obtained her doctorate degree in geodetic engineering at Hanover University, Germany in 1993. She worked as a faculty member at both Gävle University and the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. That was very brief, like 5 years, and then she took up the chair professorship at TUM, that's Technical University of Munich, in 1998. She later served as a senior vice president of TUM during the period of 2008 and 2014. She initiated the International Master's Program in Cartography in 2011, which is jointly run by TUM and also Technical University of Vienna, Technical University of Dresden, and University Twente. It's truly international. Her recent research interests include geodata integration, multimodal navigation algorithms, high-definition mapping, map-based open portal for climate events, and ethical issues in cartography. Dr. Meng is a member of the German National Academy of Sciences, served as senator in the Helmholtz Association of German Research Centers and deputy chairperson in the Senate of German Aerospace Center. She currently serves as vice president of the International Cartographic Association and is responsible for the new research agenda. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Meng for the keynote speak.
Thank you, Angela, for your introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I feel very honored to be assigned this topic. I would like to reflect on it from the perspective of my international cartographic research team at a German university. We all know that there is a great need for efficient and trustworthy bridge between the thickening heterogeneous data on the one side and the thickening diverse users on the other. And mapping plays such a good role. In fact, wherever you go, whatever you do, maps are right here waiting for you. As a lucky person, I have received professional cartographic education at various schools. During my undergraduate and graduate studies in China, my teachers provided me a wonderful cocktail of universal cartographic principles. In 2007, during the ICC in Moscow, I discovered this sample map. It is a proportional symbol map. In comparison to, I discovered this map from a building of the Moscow State University of Geodesy and Cartography. In comparison to the right side sample from a Swiss atlas, I would say both follow the same design principle, but turned this principle into a pleasant look just by simply adding an artistic subtlety. Less fun with regarding integrity issues. I started to be confused, for instance, already as undergrad student, when I noticed that different countries adopted different code of professional conduct to deal with confidential information displayed in large-scale topographic maps. Country A would try to derive a demo version for public access, but actually useless, by twisting the landscape or mirroring the landscape so that all features, including labels, are displaced. Country B would try to derive another version by simply making those sensitive features invisible. Maybe in different contexts, they are all reasonable, diplomatic, or for the national defense purposes, they are reasonable, but they are cheating. Yeah. In order to avoid this kind of integrity dilemma, I decided to work on research topics for which there are crisp technical solutions. So here you see 4 of my research topics with my team at Technical University Munich. All of them are strongly technology oriented. Surprisingly, the deeper the research goes, the more likely we are troubled by integrity issues. So now I would like to walk you through these 4 selected research topics and share with you what kind of integrity concerns are involved and which empirical approaches we have. Research focus number 1, geospatial data integration. It is a long-standing research focus since more than 20 years through a series of PhD or third-party funded projects. We tried various types of data integration with focus on road network integration, for instance, between satellite images or a vector database, or between different vector databases by different providers or different transportation modalities, or integrating even deeply learned road network from GPS trajectories. And our toolbox is getting larger and larger. The list of algorithms is getting longer and longer. Likewise, the quality indicators are extended stepwise. And interestingly, to notice that it is being extended from initially purely performance-oriented indicators to performance plus integrity indicators. The integrity issues involved in spatial data integration multifold. First of all, we noticed that none of the data sources to be integrated is ground truth. No wonder the integrated results couldn't be ground truth either. And then we noticed that semantic information is very sparsely available and unevenly distributed. And therefore, we don't have agreeable strategy on how to make use of semantic information. If we want to prioritize the robustness of algorithms, then we have to start from the worst case scenarios by ignoring all kinds of semantic information. But if the computing efficiency matters, we need to start from the best case situation. So by regarding all kinds of available semantic information. And our integration results are not replicable due to a lack of shared infrastructure. That is a forever question by reviewers of our journal publications. Because sometimes due to manual adjustment of parameter settings or data pre-processing, then our results couldn't be reproduced, even if we are very honest. And uncertainty, especially uncertainty of semantic, is very difficult to define due to lack of benchmarks, and then difficult to measure and visualize. Nevertheless, we try to make some efforts to improve algorithmic and process transparency wherever possible in our system. For instance, by adding explanations to parameter settings, including value ranges, and by adding also explanations to what for which algorithm is good and where it could cause side effects to users. And we also want to trace user interactions in order to know what kind of changes have been made. And likewise, we want to make our responses to user feedback traceable. With regard to uncertainty, we developed a interactive prototype system by embedding uncertainty grid-wise using different sizes of circle, like in this case in land cover classes created from multiple data sources. In this way, we hope the system could invite users to spot where there are hotspots of a so-called uncertainty area so that they can use their domain knowledge, their new evidences, and reasoning ability to improve the certainty. Research focus number 2 is related to linked geospatial data. Recent years, we know that the remote sensing data is being increasingly flanked by increasing social sensing data. This has opened up a new space of knowledge and forces us to think ontologically, because in the holistic knowledge space, there is far more semantic information available than ever before. Particularly, this holistic knowledge space would allow us to access to dynamic relationships, any kind of relationships in which a lot of events, dynamic events or interest events are embedded. However, we are sort of brainwashed in GIS education with layered thinking, which is still dominating. It is intuitive and straightforward to structure complex context or world into different layers or thematic layers. However, we know that slicing of the boundless geospatial knowledge is artificial. Similar to slicing of time into snapshots, we will inevitably miss a lot of cross-layer knowledge or knowledge beyond space. And what exists in layered thinking is limited knowledge for well-defined problems, but most of grand topics are ill-defined or wicked problems. And different themes evolve at different paces. It's very hard using layered thinking to manage inconsistencies between these layers. Yeah, most important is that we lack semantic associations across and beyond layers. So my team started to change from layered to linked thinking in an ongoing project financed by German National Science Foundation. We try to project CityGML from a number of selected scenarios onto a geographic virtual knowledge graph for the purpose of consistent geodata management. And knowledge graph has a good advantage because it is explainable, quite straightforward for people to understand. This could allow us to do visual analytics and to detect dense and deep knowledge buried in knowledge graph, which we usually overlook. Another worth mentioning experiment is about semantic enrichment and of open source data with high precision remote sensing data, especially geometry information. So far, open source data are still quite marginalized and regarded as a kind of nice to have support to authoritative and a structured, organized remote sensing data or mapping data. We want to do the opposite by replacing or enriching missing semantic attributes in OpenStreet maps, especially building heights and high precision building heights, which could be derived automatically from remote sensing image. We hope to have a professional uplift of OpenStreetMap. In this way, we believe we can encourage citizen scientists to contribute more valuable, more meaningful semantic information, leading to better quality of open source data. Our research focus number 3, user-centered design, which is again, a very long-standing cartographic endeavor in global comparison. Since at least 2 decades, my team has been trying to design various kinds of mobile maps which should be adapted to user needs and user behavior, like moving speeds and their current tasks. And we believe that the more we understand users, the better we can provide customized cartography services. But also in this research focus, we encounter a number of integrity concerns. First of all, user-centered design couldn't be inclusive. Yeah? If one service fits a personalized customer, another customer might misunderstand it as misleading or discriminating. And we also notice that what users really want, intrinsic needs, is different from what they potentially need. Yeah? And also when the design process is kept opaque, then the designers have their possibilities to manipulate on behalf of user-centeredness. Yeah? This is, again, a possible ethical flaw. And sometimes we notice that in our services, we provide something that users dislike. We didn't exclude that kind of information. Again, ethical flaw. And not all user needs are to be encouraged, especially user needs which are not healthy or leading to unhealthy behavior. And finally, we notice with increasing efficiency of service, especially navigation services, the spatial thinking ability could decline. How should we tackle that? I myself have experienced my gradual improvement of awareness of truly user-centered design. 20 years ago, with our team, we believe that we should design our services according to a strategy of what you see is what you want. We involve users in the final stage of evaluation of our services, and soon we discovered that we are providing often more than what users need. And this could trigger some of their extrinsic needs, and some of which might be not healthy needs. So I found myself wrong, and I need to change the strategy from what you see is what you want to what you want is what you see, by involving users right in the beginning of our design loop, so that we really provide what they intrinsically need. And I proudly presented this idea in 2004 at the third International Geoscience Conference in Maryland. But soon I found myself wrong again, because if we blindly satisfy users' needs, we might encourage some of their needs which could lead to unhealthy behavior. So it's our duty as designer to nudge users toward healthy needs and healthy behavior. So that's our current design principle. What you want and is good is what you see. Hopefully, this principle will stay for a while valid. And in terms of nudging can also sometimes have side effects. For instance, we found that there are so many pedestrian routes recommendations provided by commercial providers or open source routing machines. And all these recommendations may follow certain optimization criteria, like maximum clean area, best physical exercise, and so on. But nevertheless, we found out that the open source routing machines usually provide actually the best optimal routes. Why? Is that due to incompleteness of data by commercial provider, or is there some profit-driven nudging effect involved? We don't know. What we can do is to show all these options to users so that we can stimulate their critical thinking about data sources and possible problematic ranking criteria by commercial providers. Another worth mentioning experiment is about the design of different mixed reality-based symbols with which we try to improve, on the one hand, the indoor navigation efficiency, and at the same time, we don't want that users' spatial thinking skills decline. And it is possible in different options, we can always find one option which could provide a good balance. The research focus number 4, map-based storytelling. Storytelling is not new, but it's revitalized in the burgeoning data science and artificial intelligence. So we did some preliminary study, for instance, try to categorize the famous Paul mode collection with 800 persuasive maps so that we can get some insights into the design rules or design principles of these story maps in terms of annotation, color association, comics, and so on. And we firmly believe map-based storytelling is quite exciting because it will inject different personal perspectives, including conflicting value systems and their emotions as well as lives into map, making the reading far more interesting and entertaining than banal cartographer principles. Nevertheless, yeah, of course, here is an example. No one would stay untouched by visually appealing good map design, although the aesthetic values and the local flavors are not objectively measurable, but they reflect the changing relations between the world and the designer and between the map and the viewer. So be it European nations' iconic artwork or peace-loving Chinese people. Look, the lotus flower. I'm also a peace-loving person. It's artistically very pleasant. But of course, map-based story map involve a lot of integrity concerns. Those values like journalistic persuasion, subjective perspective, emotional design, and so on. They all seem to contradict what we learned from normative mapping, like map-centered, objective, emotionless, professional, authoritative, and trustworthy. And especially in a time when news maps have very notorious reputations, driven by the business model, bad news is good news, fake news is better than no news at all. These concerns are more serious and challenging us whether we should adopt this kind of design. My team decided to take map-based or treat map-based storytelling as a creative lie that helps users realize better truth and infer future possibilities. And we conducted some preliminary studies of so-called data-driven mining of storytelling principles. Only when we know how those story maps are designed, we can better counteract possible biases or ethical concerns. So according to our preliminary study of 5 selected newsrooms from USA, Europe, and Asia with about 2,200 story maps, we are able to categorize them into different design principles. One of the interesting findings is that in USA and Europe, journalists tend to grab easy-to-use open source tools. They are making boring maps, less diverse maps from their Asia colleagues. Yeah, it is quite a problematic trend. But anyway, storytelling maps are very interesting and can draw attention of a lot of different target groups. Therefore, we want to include storytelling map as genre of cartographic design and continue. All these ongoing research focuses in my team have revealed the omnipresent issue of integrity. We can't avoid it. We can only face it. But we have a tougher challenge. Early on, cartographers could simply follow a sequential value chain by quality assure every step so that we can prevent errors and noises from propagating. But now with the incremental data streaming and processing, the sequential value chain has become networked value loop. At any node or edge, we have some untraceable user contributions from professionals or participatory users. And therefore, we face a much tougher challenge of spotting and mitigating biases in each value loop. Usually, we can adopt so-called norm-based approach to harness integrity concerns with help of code of integrity, professional conduct rules and standards, and so on. It is able to define ethical framework within which we are expected to act. Violation or misconduct will be accordingly punished or discovered and punished. But this kind of norm-based approach emphasizes extrinsic incentives, and therefore with some restraining effect. The longer the list of rules and standards, the narrower our design space. In the worst case, the innovation and the creativity which are required to break laws will be largely inhibited. On this note, we need to consult our hearts using additional value-based approach, which emphasizes enforcement with best practices, role models, and culture of trust, especially education with conscious learning of good habits and conscious unlearning of bad habits. This emphasis on intrinsic motivation and could be universally actionable. So we believe the combination both, they already share a joint part, but they are different complementary approaches. And we know that human mind is incredibly biased. And there is a taxonomy of about 154 cognitive biases based on survey literature, visualization, and computer graphic. And they can be organized according to task categories or flavors. I tried myself to look into those individual cognitive biases because here each dot represents one bias. And then I got a feeling I'm living like in a minefield and wrong most of the time. Here are some examples. Cartographers or computer graphic designers tend to provide so-called progressive rendering so that users don't have to wait a couple of minutes till the large data amount is uploaded or downloaded. But users tend to infer for the whole data set that the distributional pattern based on the initial part. This might be wrong, or they can miss, for instance, some peak. Likewise, if we show users infection, let's say, with initial part, they tend to infer the overall distribution will be a linear distribution, but it's obviously not true. So there are so many biases involved. And if we know these biases, then we can take measures to counteract. Another example, very famous for us cartographers, if we are giving for two anonymous themes, color place map, and based on theme, maybe we try to figure out whether between these two themes there is some negative correlation. But if we replace these two themes by crime and income, our bias will immediately jump in, guide us to see based on our believing, so that we see much stronger negative correlation. This is a typical confirmation bias. Another example shows us a same quantity could be arranged in so many different ways, but due to perceptual biases, we can't accurately judge quantities in some of arrangements. Yet another example, typically used as interactive tools for header planning and statistics, showing how noise might blur trends of, for instance, a stagnation trend and a growing trend. With increasing noise level, both trends could be blurred till in the end, we may hallucinate some patterns which do not exist. Being inspired by this kind of survey, and my team decided we just launched another project financed by DFG, which is about a geospatial analytical platform for guided learning. With data sets for selected scenarios like pandemic or climate change, we want to give a try to check how far some of the learning strategies could help us, different stakeholders, to unlearn a sequence of selected popular cognitive biases. And we are designing a set of experiments, and by giving benchmark solutions, want to check whether without unlearning and with unlearning, user behavior could be more or less changed. Our aim with unlearning is to improve the transparency of visual analytical processes as far as possible, and we want to allow a systemic understanding of various kinds of cognitive biases occurring in different nodes or edges of knowledge graph. And of course, we want to build capacity of critical reasoning of involved stakeholders, be it citizens or decision makers or system designers. Finally, I want to share a number of messages with you. First of all, we know that cartographers are good at creating interface between thick data and thick users. Therefore, we can take an overarching responsibility for integrity, which is a joint concern among geodata providers, system developers, and map designers and target users. And we believe that a combination of norm-based approach with value-based approach, I mean with emphasis of conscious learning and unlearning, could help us better promote sustainable and actionable integrity. And finally, last but not least, as long as there are multiple mapping solutions, which is often the case, in terms of design to a geospatial problem, it is always possible for us to identify a more ethical one, because map design carries a dual value, the value of underlying data and the value of the design. This reminds me of a fable between a boy and his grandma. The boy and grandma were watching two wolves, one good and one evil, fighting against each other. The grandma turned to the boy. "Hey, my dear, in your heart, there are also two wolves, one good, one evil, fighting against each other. Which one will finally win?" The boy asked curiously. "The one you feed, and you feed over and over again," answered the grandma. Thank you for your attention. This is my team.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Meng, for the super interesting talk. We will have time to ask questions, but please let us continue with the panelists' presentations. After that, we'll have time Oh, you want to ask a question? Could you hold for maybe 30 minutes or so? Then we have time to ask. Yeah. All right. Let's turn to our panelists. Our first panelist is Nadine Alame, who will be, I think she is already joining us virtually. Before she starts, let me just very quickly introduce her. The description is also available on the website, so I will be really brief. You can find more details online. Dr. Nadine Alame is the CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium. She's a recognized leader in creating and applying open geospatial mapping standards in many domains, including aviation, Earth observations, public safety, and defense. Prior to OGC, she held various roles in industry as well. There is a long list you can check on the website, very rich experiences. Dean graduated from MIT with a PhD in Information Systems Engineering and 2 master's degrees in Civil Engineering and Urban Planning with a concentration in Geospatial Information Systems. He holds a BS degree in Computer Engineering from the American University of Beirut. Let's welcome Nadine.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm really sorry I'm not there in person. Everything was going well, but there were many last minute things. I appreciate the opportunity to join virtually. And I also have to say, I don't know. I mean, I'm just like so overwhelmed by the keynote speaker. So the Q is amazing and her work is amazing. So I'm going to try to inject a different perspective. You know, as per the introduction, I'm an MIT geek, so I'm a technologist. So when we talk about ethics and integrity, these are not things that we have done as technical people. And I think maybe this is what I'm bringing in, you know, to this panel. So I thank Mark Seigan again for inviting me. I hope you're in the audience. And I have just a few slides, I think 5 minutes or so, from a technical perspective. So here we are, a technical community, and trying and actually talking about ethics and integrity. And I'll mix those you know, in my just points here. So first of all, I think, I hope that everybody recognizes OGC, so the Open Geospatial Consortium has been around. I hope you recognize us because we have all these standards that connect the systems and the organizations for disasters and climate and infrastructure and defense and so on. But I've been the CEO of OGC now for about 3 years or so. And I've increasingly gained this appreciation that actually our work is more than just the technical standards. And again, I think it links so nicely with we're more than technology and maps and data. We are human beings trying to work together to make the world a better place. So I think that's why I've become way more appreciative of the membership in OGC. So the 500 plus, you know, government, industry, and academic members who are looking at all these issues. So not just trying to do the operational systems, but also genuinely trying to make the world a better place and to make it easier for anybody to use geospatial location. And we do it via what I call collective problem solving. I think that's the power of what we're talking about. Maps visualize and project and communicate, but what's behind them is a lot of integration, heavy data integration, and a huge collaboration, I think, that I think we often don't quite appreciate, but it's actually it's a differentiator of this community here, the carto, the geospatial, the location, you name it. So we're trying to make, at the end of the day in OGC, sort of the updated mission to make this spatial data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And as we talk about fair, you'll see we have others who say we have to be fair and we also have to care. This is where the ethical, the reusability, the integrity comes in, and we have to balance these two. And at the end, also, I have realized that it's not just about standards, it's not just about people, but it's also about working together and documenting best practices, sharing tools, sharing lessons learned with each other. And again, appreciate this conference for providing this venue. So I'll make it quick. Why, what is the link to ethics? What is the link to integrity if we talk about technical standards like web services and JSON and XML and cloud native geospatial and GeoAI and so on? So it started actually, October 2020 in the pandemic. And we had this member meeting. We meet several times a year as OGC members. And one of the topics, it was interesting to see ethics come out as a discussion topic in a technical community. So it was driven because we were talking about contact tracing and so, location and devices and all of that. But it also emerged because the maps that people used during the pandemics, and it depends on what scale. Is it the scale of the neighborhood or the state or your county? And you can tell a totally different story, even sometimes by country. All these maps and these dashboards. And it was a realization that the genie is out of the bottle, and I appreciate the keynote speech. So Liqui again said it very eloquently. And we had these observations. I think that's what I'm going to share here. I have no solutions, it's just observations from a technical community that there's something, as Parsons said, interesting, dangerous, and valuable with our power of actually being able to integrate all sorts of data based on space and time. And actually, if we know where things are and when they are, we know a lot about the people and the places, if you think about it. GeoAI, so the artificial intelligence, that's a huge field right now. Those spatial patterns, and again, the increased awareness that it's not just integrity and it's not just the provenance of the data and the processes, but also the ethical, this power of finding open source data, combining it with credit card data, combining it and actually unleashing some amazing information, but which boundaries it crosses is to be determined. There was also the W3C was exploring this topic with the responsible use of geographic information. So all in all, this is a wonderful opportunity to add value, not just technically, but actually the same technical people as they're building those solutions for the world, right? For governments, for industry. If these same technical people, I like the learning and unlearning, we can plant those seeds in their heads, that's the opportunity. So we were proud, I don't know if this was covered already in this conference, but we were proud to support the Locus Charter, which is the ethical use of location information. Very simple mission, but very powerful at the same time. 10 founding principles. We need to be careful, right? Minimize the data, the intrusion, the privacy, protecting the vulnerable. Nothing, I think, new if you're reading all of this, but to put it all together as a reminder to all of us, right? To all of us, that's the gist of a charter, something we will subscribe to as a community as we build the solutions for this world. So many people, organizations are supporting this, which is amazing, and you've got the links. But one last thing, we had a webinar, interestingly, I think was it last week, about the applications of this charter. And I captured some tidbits from this. Again, I'm sharing what I'm hearing. My favorite part was that we live in this world of datafication, where everything we touch and we do is turning into data that can be harvested, that can be analyzed, that can be combined with other data. And that's, I think, why we're having the conversation today. We're at this point in time where we can be dangerous because we have all the tools and all the data. And another favorite part, that when we talk about, I love this, it's a behavior thing. It's not a law. When you talk about integrity, it's a personal thing. I love the example with the grandson and his grandma, because that's what it is. It's not about what you can and cannot do. It's about what you choose to do, what we choose to do. And I think this balancing of this collective versus the individual, because, you know, your integrity is different than my integrity, your ethics are different than my ethics, but collectively, what is good for the collective good. And I want to share some questions that came up. How do we get around this and actually have it, the unlearning? I think I like the unlearning a lot, because how do we incorporate this in the new learning as we design architectures, as we, you know, develop these solutions? What training do we need that's not just a checkbox and that's not just, you know, continuous awareness? How does it become part of us? And my last point here is that I think emphasizing Nikri's message about, you know, we call it the genie is out of the bottle. So we really need to address not the possibility of things, but actually the behavior and the collective behavior. So I'll leave you with that. This is the time for this conversation. Again, I appreciate accommodating me like this, and I'm looking forward to the other speakers and their viewpoints. Thank you so much again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Nadine. Yeah, again, hold off your question. We do have plenty of, well, I shouldn't say plenty, about 20 minutes, so enough opportunities. You might want to take notes of your questions. I know we have to, will be exposed to other ideas and presentations, so it's a good idea to take some notes of your questions. So let me introduce our next speaker panelist, Dr. David Paget. David is Associate Professor of Geography and Director of the Geographic Information Sciences at Tennessee State University. He has served as the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment, which is acronym of GLOBE, partner and trainer for TSU since 2001. He is a graduate of Western Kentucky University and the University of Florida. Since 1992, Dr. Paget has become the owner and chief consultant of an environmental consulting firm, GEO Mental. He was awarded the American Association of Geographers 2019 Presidential Achievement Award for significant contributions in advancing geography, GIS, and STEM education within the historically Black college and university. The same year, he was named an Ethical GEO Fellow by the American Geographical Society in support of his project, Democratizing Geospatial Technology. Let's welcome David Paget.
Good morning. So I established the Geographic Information Sciences Lab at Tennessee State University over 20 years ago. And TSU, Tennessee State University, is an historically Black college and university. And all HBCUs were built on a tradition of service from the very beginning. At Tennessee State University, our motto is think, work, serve. Our charge is enter to learn, leave to serve. So I knew that when I built the Geographic Information Sciences Lab, that we were going to be providing service to communities, specifically environmental justice communities. Again, I'm an Ethical Geo Fellow, and my project, Democratizing Geospatial Technology, specifically put me in the place of providing these services to environmental justice communities all over the country. The first thing is to go into communities, and at this point, I had to make a decision. In some cases, we have to make a decision as to whether we're going to be scholar activists or activist scholars? Are we going to be scholar activists or activist scholars? And really, we need both. You know, we do need people to do research and publish in academic journals and do those things. But an activist scholar actually goes to communities, actually works on the ground, as you can see in this photograph. But we need both people on both sides of the coin when it comes to developing and creating map products. So this is me in a community working with people who might be cafeteria workers, truck drivers, children, helping them to build maps of their communities so that they can fight against environmental injustice, so that they can empower themselves and be engaged as agents in map development, not as subjects. How many of you all in here have ever used a rapidograph pen? Wow, not a whole lot of hands going up. Yeah, so you all remember those days. We didn't have technology. When we made a map back then, we started off with no tech. You had a sheet of paper, a table, and your rapidograph pen that you prayed to the pen guides did not leak all over your map. It's usually when you're almost done. A lot of people are looking at me like, what are you talking about? Well, it's back in the day. So back then, not everybody could make a map. You know, so that was, but the good news today is anybody can make a map. We have all this free technology available to everyone, from Google Maps to ArcGIS Online. Anybody can make a map. That's the good news. The bad news is that anybody can make a map, right? Anybody, and we've seen some bad maps, but what is missing is cartography. That's what's missing. That's what we were taking. That's the class we took with those rapidograph pens, cartography. That's missing now. Anybody can just get online. None of the science behind cartography, no discussion about color ramps, no discussion about any of that. Pop a map up, you've seen them, they're bad. So when we start off with community-based mapping, we don't take any technology out there. We just walk through the community. When was the last time we walked through our community? Most of us drive through at 35, 40 miles per hour, and there's so much that we miss. And we're talking in terms of environmental justice communities, and we walk through what's there. And I've done a lot of pathology mapping. Where are all the dumps? Where's all the crime? Where are all the bad things in our communities? But when we start to engage with people in their communities, they say, well, wait a minute. You know, our communities aren't these geographies of pathology. There are a lot of good things. And so we want to replicate those good things through what we call community asset mapping. That begins with us just walking through, pointing out things. Then later on, we get into all the technology, GPS, GIS, so on and so forth. And with this technology and with this power, communities can enable themselves to make change, to fight against environmental injustice. I'm going to go through a few case studies. This was a community, Wedgwood community in Pensacola, Florida, a Black community that in this case, there was a 4-lane highway that was planned to be built through this community. The local activists, after going through the training, created maps themselves, went forward to their county commission, using the maps showed that that highway wouldn't just impact the Black community, but would impact everybody. Highway was immediately shut down. Now let me make a note, I wasn't there. You know, my job is to work myself out of a job. I can't wear a cape and fly into communities anytime they need me. You know, there's just one David Paget. There's lots of communities. They should be able to empower themselves to become cartographers, solve their own problems like this community did, stop this highway, using maps, and also $13 million that was slated for the highway was used for community improvement projects for infrastructure in the Wedgwood neighborhood, and they weren't done. Later on, there was a landfill permit. Now, this community already has 13 landfills in a residential community. Believe it or not, someone tried to put a 14th permit for a landfill in this community. The gentleman you see here, he's a pastor, Pastor Greer. He's not a cartographer. He's not an engineer, but yet he and other members of the Unity in the Family Ministry went before the county commission and used a series of maps, used cartography, blocked this landfill permit from going through. Again, I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere near Wedgwood, Florida when they did this. This is called community empowerment with maps. Here's a map of the historically Black Turkey Creek community in Mississippi. I went to this community, trained them at Gulfport High School and how to use maps. They're using the EJ screen map to fight against an inland port facility that's being planned for their community. Their community is zoned industrial. What the state of Mississippi and other antagonists are trying to do is gloss over the fact that there are human beings within this industrial zoned area. You might ask, well, how can a community that's clearly residential be zoned industrial? These are Black people and they're in Mississippi. End of story. So we see what's happened in Jackson, Mississippi recently. We had a large city, largely African-American, without water for months. This is Mississippi. These are African-Americans. This is what happens. But fortunately, this case is going all the way to the state Supreme Court of Mississippi, and we're using these maps as evidence in that case. So we're moving forward. I don't have nearly enough time to talk about this, but this is the story of Africatown in Mobile, Alabama. It was a front page story, I believe, in the February 2020 National Geographic magazine. You might have read about it. There's a movie on Netflix now called Descendant about this story of the last slave ship. But I've been working in Mobile, Alabama, in the Africatown community for about 7 years. We started out with asset mapping. After this community showed up on 60 Minutes, front page of National Geographic, now there's a movie. There are going to be people wanting to visit this town. But as of right now, there's nothing there, really. The artifacts are there, the history is there, the people are there, the descendants are there, but there's no infrastructure for heritage tourism or what we might call cultural tourism. Some of you might have gone to a place called Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, right? Some of us have been there. It was a high school field trip, right? You learn about the colonial history of colonial USA. That place was second only to Disney World in terms of visitation by tourists. Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia, we know the mouse gets everybody, but after the mouse was Colonial Williamsburg. So this cultural heritage tourism has amazing potential. And so I'm working with this community, building story maps. My students actually had this as a class project. My students built this story map in 3 weeks. My students had never even heard of GIS, and they were virtual, and they managed to build this map because the National Park Service, which is helping to develop a certain portion of this called the Africatown Connections Blueway, the National Park Service didn't have GIS. At least the cultural division of the National Park Service did not have GIS or does not have GIS. My students stepped in. I said, you got 3 weeks to build this map as a service to this community, and my HBCU students did that. And I said, you can take this with you in your digital resume, and if somebody asks you, have you done GIS? In an interview, you can pop up the link to this map and say, yes, I have. And not only did I do GIS, not just for me, but I'm helping this community develop its heritage tourism. We also have done some drone work in the community. And so a second set of students developed this story map of drone coverages. So the drone imagery has to be conducted in order for the landscape architects to develop the sites. I mean, this is a completely undeveloped historical resource right now. The Heritage House is going to open up in Africatown, I believe, next January. Again, the movie The Descendants is on Netflix right now. In Houston, Texas, this is an area that is the largest petrochemical site it's the second largest in the world, largest in the country. No zoning in Houston. People living literally next door to refineries and all kinds of things that you would not want to live next door to because there's no zoning in Houston. And so people are very concerned about their air quality. So I've been working with doing community-based mapping, asset mapping, training them how to use EJ Screen, how to place air monitors in the right areas. This is very interesting. Overtown in Miami, Florida, is being encroached upon by developers, largely as a result of sea level rise. Developers are moving inland, taking over this historically Black community. I went there, Overtown, we did an asset map in order to preserve their history. I went back to Overtown. I was visiting Overtown. I noticed this placard on the ground that had a QR code. I read the box for the placard. I said, wait a minute, I wrote that. After I built the story map, this community moved forward and created a virtual tour using QR codes. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We start off with a simple story map. These people empowered themselves to create a virtual map, which eventually will have voiceovers from elders. Elders saw the original story map and said, that's not all of Black history in Overtown. And so that now we'll have people who actually live the history. When you scan the QR code, you can hear their voices talk about places like the Clyde Killens Pool Hall and Recreation Center when they were there, when it was viable. More air monitoring in Houston, Texas, and helping them to install purple air sensors in collaboration with NASA. And eventually they'll have their own dashboard of all of these community-based sensors in Houston. And so not the regulatory monitors, but the community-based sensors will all be on one platform. I've been working with them for 2 years on that project. We now have Dr. Archer, you saw yesterday. We have an HBCU environmental justice technical team, and we are going to be providing the same kind of map services with HBCU professional mapping experts to environmental justice communities all over the country. Well, we're doing it right now. We have created a supplementary climate and environmental justice screening tool. The original CGIS tool did not include race. We have reprogrammed it. We have race in that tool built on an Esri platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. All right, let's welcome our final panelist, Dr. Bo Zhao. Dr. Bo Zhao is an associate professor in the Department of Geography at the University of Washington. Prior to that position, he was an assistant professor at Oregon State University after completing a postdoc position at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Bo's research lies at the intersection of GI science and human geography. He has developed a unique humanistic approach to examining GI science and technologies, especially for the interests of vulnerable populations. He has a very special publication, recent publication titled Deep Fake Geography. I'm sure everyone knows that, right? Deep Fake Geography, when geospatial data encounter artificial intelligence. It was published in the CAGES journal in 2021. Right, about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, but it really went viral online and received a L-metric score of 362. I checked this morning, early in the morning. Well, anything beyond the L-metric, anything above 20 is already exceptional to me, my standards. This is huge number, really. So the work urges GI scientists to develop coping strategies to the ambivalent nature of GeoAI in the age of post-truth. Welcome, Bo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Angela, for this wonderful introduction. Thank you, Dr. Meng, and morning, everyone. So what I would like to think with you today is my recent research on deepfake geography, its social implications, and ways to detect them. With this empirical study, I want to further reflect upon the geospatial data integrity issue with a vision towards GIS and cartography in the so-called post-truth era. So as just Dr. Yao mentioned, this paper got viral and a lot of attention from media outlets, industry, and academia, as illustrated in this slide, that the three major geography associations in the North America have reported this work. As a leading author, I initiated this project to profoundly reflect upon the potential challenges of GeoAI on our society and our everyday life. Deepfake geography, in a narrow sense, describes realistic satellite imagery that has forged by GeoAI in order to illustrate a landscape that doesn't exist in the real world. The satellite imagery, under most circumstances, cannot be distinguished by human eyes. While many GIS practitioners and cartographers have been celebrating the technical merits of GeoAI, deep learning and other type of AI for geographical problem solving, few have publicly recognized or criticizing the potential threats of GeoAI, especially the deepfake geography. As warned by the former Chief Information Officer at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, deepfake geography is the newest AI-enabled weapon, using his own word, the deepfaking photos of the Earth. He also pressed the urgency to study deepfake satellite imagery, as he indicated some countries are already doing it right now, using GANs, which is a typical generative AI, to manipulating scenes and pixels to create things for nefarious reasons. So I think it's a time to think about ways to detecting the fake satellite imageries. As a researcher, to better cope with this deepfake geography, we need to first understand what deepfake satellite imagery is generated. And also we need to collect a large collection of deepfake satellite imagery to learn their features in order to helping us to detecting them. So we use the generative AI to synthesize satellite imageries. Considering the time, I probably will skip the slides, but if you want to have interest in this technical process, we can bring it up in the QA session. So here on this slide, the top two shows a real Google Street Map on the left and its correspondent auto image on the right. And then we show two synthetic images on the bottom. As you can see clearly that the landscape structure are pretty much the same, but the geographical scenery are changed dramatically. Along this line, we also generated satellite imageries of different platforms of cameras, like Google Earth imagery at different zoom levels, Sentinel-2 and Landsat 8. As you can see, those images are so realistic. Our lab have used 500,000 images to reach a realistic level like this. So that reminds me some of the arguments which Dr. Meng has mentioned, seeing is believing, and which were, when I heard her presentation, I was thinking how we can unlearn this very intuitively conscious, right? Perhaps really difficult. So to detect the deepfake images from the authentic ones, we reviewed the previous papers and proposed a post-vector machine approach to learn 12 salient features of deepfake satellite imageries. The features are from the spatial domain, the color histogram, and frequency domain. The approach reached the F1 score more than 0.95 when taking all 12 features into consideration. Here, the F1 score is a measure of the model performance. It combines the precision and the recall rate in a single metric. The higher the value, the model is more accurate. So previous slides mainly showed our research progress by 2019. Since then, we have initiated a few new directions to cope with the deepfake geography. First, we're thinking about NFT-based satellite imagery licensing system. So NFT, non-fungible token, a newly emerged approach to manage, recognizing, and protect the copyright of digital arts. We cartographers or GIS scientists may recognize the authenticity of a satellite imagery using a blockchain non-fungible tokens. Secondly, it is also possible to develop an API to detect authenticity of a satellite imagery, like how Twitter notifies the trustworthiness of a tweet. Another approach to dealing with the spreading of fake satellite imagery is to build a scientist-led public-facing platform that allow people to share their opinions towards the authenticity of satellite imagery. We're thinking of doing this because we believe that rather than immediately telling people what is true or not, it is more important to allow people of different opinions to discuss or offer their own interpretations of the ground truths to debate and to discuss. Moreover, in today's so-called post-truth era, the process of determining truths has been deeply influenced by people's emotion. There is a strong motive from the public to let the scientists to lead the process of determining what is the truth or fake. Because of these two major reasons, we propose this public-facing fact-checking platform. Now, let's go back to the thing of the plenary session, the integrity of geospatial data. My work on deepfake geography is definitely related to this general concern of integrity. But beyond this, I sincerely believe that the geospatial data integrity can be better examined by a rewire of geoscience or cartography, and also by rethinking about the social implications of geospatial data in today's post-truth context. This kind of rewire and rethinking actually reminds me of an AAG session that I co-organized in 2019. That today, a lot of these research topics are still yet to explore. For example, like rethinking of the ground truth, spatial data quality, uncertainty, and also how we can detect fake locations, proof of locations, and also understanding the spatial dissemination of fake location information. Critique of fake location information like checking, geotag, location-based review, and so on and so forth. Also, case studies of geospatial data falsification is also important. Along this line, I also, with several other my co-authors, work on a paper named "Standing with #Standing Rock: Invasion Epistemology Shift in Understanding Geospatial Data in the Post-Truth Era." Is also try to shine new lights on this issue. Okay, that's all I want to think with you into this presentation. To the end of my talk, I want to express my gratitude to my co-authors, Yifan Sun, Chunxue Xu, Shaozeng Zhang, and Mia Bennett, and Binda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bo. Well, that concludes the presentations and open the floor for questions. Now it's your chance. Yes, Chris. Oh, Nick. I'm sorry. Yeah, Nick.
There's a proportion of the population that refers to me as Chris. It's a genetic. It's inherited from my grandfather.
Thank you.
So I don't. It's not your problem. It's a standing wave. You know, on the theme of integrity, it's very.
Sorry. May I invite our keynote and the panelists here so that you can address questions to them? Yeah.
It's an easy target to put up the layer diagram and claim that the layer diagram is the past. But the layer diagram is an inherent part of the collaborative world that we're living in, the shared knowledge base and the interactions between organizations and people. In trying to define the difference between data and information, Barbara Poor and I present the point of view that data becomes information when people stand behind it. That the data needs support, it needs the integrity that comes from that human arrangement. The layer diagram is a chart of our organizational structures, that we have devolved responsibility by theme. And we have organizations that are structured by theme. And we're not going to undo that. What we're going to do is create those links. The links are the important part, because the links are one organization accepting the information from another organization. So they're not antithetical to the layer diagram. They're an inherent part of that. The layer diagram, when we presented it at AutoCarto 7, and we put it in the public domain, it was a specific piece of Westport Township. It's been redrawn a million times, but it was actual data, it was actual people and actual organizations. That layer diagram was a chart of the interactions between those organizations who sat around a table and said, I'll do this if you will do that. And I think that's where the integrity is still going to come from, that the field work we were doing in the 1980s is still valid here. And we shouldn't throw out what we have developed over the past 50 years. And you know, it's easy to throw up that layer diagram and say, oh yeah, that's the way we used to do things. But it's also the structure of our political environment that we're in. And we can't, it isn't our job to undo that. That's, I want to support you in saying that it's the linkages that's what we should be doing. It's just before that, don't throw away the layer model.
Thank you, Nick. I think it's a comment. Li Qiu, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I may, reflect on. I actually did not mean to throw it away. Rather, we want to think beyond that. It's similar to we need a both Newtonian system and relativity theory, depending on what kind of scenario we are in. We simply need all the time to critically revisiting what we are used to, and then to think beyond what is still possible. And I believe both layered thinking and linked thinking are needed. And more and more we face wicked problems, and therefore we need to be ready for linked thinking.
Thank you, Li Qiu. Do we have any other question for any of our 4 speakers? I know Nadine is online. So.
I had a question.
Vanessa.
Yes. One, I wanted to say that I think it's really cool to see the variety of things that you talked about, and a lot of nuanced and interesting things, including out of the box thinking. And I think, to your point, it really does matter to continue to think outside the box because of technology is constantly shifting and so on. I wanted to ask a question about the map diagram that you discussed, where you're considering making maps for the users. It was the 3-tiered one, and at the top you said making the map for the user and then also making sure it is good, and that the map is only showing good things and helping the users avoid unhealthy behaviors. And I was just curious what you were defining as unhealthy behaviors as well as what is considered good, because technically those are also ethical questions to be asking. So I was just really curious about that.
Yeah, it seems it's me to reflect on that. Yeah, it's a relative, and that's why I believe it's important to include users right in the beginning of our design loop. And these users are in different target groups, and sometimes they have contradictory values. And therefore, we need to communicate in a non-misunderstanding way for which target user we mean this is good for them. And still, it is not absolute statement. Still, we need to interactively asking whether it's really what they mean. If not, let's try to correct immediately.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Bo, you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Follow up with Dr. Meng, I guess another layer of thinking about this is understanding ethics from a duality of good and bad. So these two things are always coexist together, and how we can better understanding it through like a Gauss perspective, how to highlighting the goods, but in the meantime, the bad could somehow fade out to the background, but always rethinking and those two things, and also treating ethical as an evolving issue that we can always reflect upon.
Great, thank you. Nadine, did you want to, I saw you, did you want to respond?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have just a quick comment. I think, again, the timeliness of this, I love the question and the answers, because we have now launched, not us, like many standards organizations have founded a metaverse standards forum. And these issues are bubbling up also big time. And so we have compiled all the issues around the metaverse, right? Whether it's standards and technology and digital assets and, you know, tokens and NFTs and all of that. And the top five, ethics, integrity came up at the top. So I think this good and bad, you'll see it in us, in the virtual world, and now in this mix of what we're creating in the metaverse, whether it's good or bad. So I think I'm just transposing that conversation also in another context. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nadine. We have time for one last question because we do have a general question for everyone to respond to. Yeah, so last chance for a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, could you check at the online question? Can someone? Okay.
Sure, I'll
Yeah, may I read it?
question. Sure. Oh, go on, please.
Oh yeah, whoever. So thank you. Okay, Dr. Meng, can you speak to how the work you presented on linked geospatial data and semantics might inform research on the spatial dimension of homelessness?
Intuitively, I would regard the spatial dimension of homelessness as it is a spatial dimension, but I can also regard it as a semantic attribute in a knowledge graph. And I will try actually use both a layered and a linked thing to see whether the solutions would converge. If not, what kind of added value in each of the version would produce. That is my intuitive answer.
Yeah, Bo also wants to respond to that.
Yeah, because some of my research is relevant to this perspective. That maybe two quick comments on this. One is it's related because most of the homelessness are measured through the one-night count, which is really highly biased data because it was usually, in the United States, it was calculated in the January, which I guess somehow purposely counted during that time because usually the people who are suffering homelessness are sheltered because January is usually very cold. So how to linking data which was purposely biased by some hierarchical power stakeholder, that's one perspective. Secondly, I guess is how to link data, make those invisible visible. That's another perspective of homelessness because homeless people also suffering like a digital divide by nature. And also I know some homeless people, two homeless people using one cell phone, how we can also identify those kind of issues is another perspective, I guess. So yeah,
Right.
that's
Thank
what
you.
I can
David,
offer.
yes, David. do you want to-
Yeah, I've actually worked with the Homelessness Commission in Nashville and used GPS-enabled homeless count. From an ethical standpoint, homelessness has been criminalized in a lot of communities. And when we talked to the homeless population, said our purpose for mapping your location is so that the city cannot deny that there's homelessness in certain parts of the city so that they can get those services outside of the urban core. But that city also was using the police to raid homeless camps. And so the homeless population said, be very careful with making this data visible because we don't want the police to use it to attack us and, destroy our camps. And so we had to make an ethical promise to the homeless population that we would not make those maps visible to anyone except us.
Thank you so much, everyone. I did see raised hands, but unfortunately, in the interest of time, we have to go to our final question. For our audience, everyone, all the speakers, may I ask you for one takeaway message that you want to deliver to our audience? What might be your the actionable item on top of your list that you would recommend to the professional community? Can I start with you, Li Qiu?
I try to, start. I already mentioned in my presentation the importance of education, be it conscious learning or unconscious unlearning. I noticed already some positive development in European universities where they try to integrate the ethic issues into curriculum. And I believe ethics is mapping part of the ethics of technology and AI, with emphasis on the role of educators, no longer just teachers. We are co-learners. We do not know better than our students. So in a co-learner platform, we might mutually point out our blind spots and learn together. This could be a new ecosystem, not just for our regular study programs, and it's a kind of lifelong, life-wide learning platform. I would try my best in the remaining of my career to do that as educator and
so
co-learner.
adding to the curriculum. Thanks. David, what would be
Yes, if we're going to be in the practice of mapping vulnerable populations such as homelessness or environmental justice communities, the population must not just be on the map, they must be active agents in developing the map. I'm working with NASA right now. NASA in the past year has decided to do environmental justice. And so we're working to take their satellite developed models of air quality, et cetera, and incorporate community concerns and issues into those models. And we're just getting started. It's extraordinarily challenging because NASA has not ever done anything like this ever, getting actual human subject data into their models. But we're going to do it, and it'll make them a lot more effective when we try to protect these vulnerable communities from disparities in air quality, flooding, gentrification, and what have you. But the people have to be part of the model building, not just subjects.
Thank you. Yeah, adding the focus on vulnerable population. Thanks. Bo, do you
You
want
want Nadine to?
Yeah, Nadine, either one. Nadine, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Bo. I think we continue to do what we're doing right here, which is raising the awareness and documenting, sharing the best practices from, again, a technical perspective, having this awareness as we develop our solutions. From the data perspective, it's going to go back to how do we capture the metadata, the reproducible processes, making sure that when we do AI, we have transparent processes. And to me, it's about figuring out ways to capture the technical part. So that's the metadata, fit for use, data quality is very big to lead to data integrity. But also figuring out ways to communicate those assumptions in the data that feed everything in ways that are accessible. And again, reproducible and non-biased.
Thank you. So adding efforts to ensure awareness, right? Thank you. Yes. Bo?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the education and also empowering the underserved population and how to transfer from the technical rationale to communication rationale, which nothing has been mentioned. I think for me, I want to point out that it is a time to rethinking about the data liability issue under this so-called post-truth context that because everyone today can be a map user and as well as a map generator. So I think that we need to consider the map ethics along with the map literacy. How to cultivating people with these two perspectives is so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know in the interest of what we went, time is out, right? Oh, perfect, almost perfect. Just one more minute. Well, thank you. That's really, we have takeaway messages and we really enjoyed the awesome, outstanding presentations. Thank you so much. May I invite you, all of you, joining me to give an applause to all our speakers. Thank you. This is awesome. Okay, I think it's time for a break, coffee break, and then we'll be back for another session.